This is going to be my final video on the whole Jesse Williams speech at the BET Minstrel Awards. And in this final video, I'm going to deal with many of the responses I got to both videos and responses I got to the posts I made on Facebook regarding actor Jesse Williams. And many of the responses that I received on both videos and on the Facebook post were quite disturbing. Because people could not deal with the information I was presenting to them, they started going into ad hominem attacks and shaming tactics. And one of the accusations made towards me was that I was jealous of actor Jesse Williams. I have nothing to be jealous of this actor. I merely, as a man who follows God, is trying to follow the Word of God, where God said, "Do unto others as you would have them do unto you," and to love your neighbor as you love yourself. Trying to follow the commandment that God presented. Because if I love my neighbor and I see my neighbor about to be taken advantage of, if I care about them enough, I'm going to say something. And if I don't want someone to take advantage of me, I don't want anyone to be taken advantage of in the exact same way. Because when I see this Jesse Williams come to the stage of that BET Awards and make this speech where he says all the right things, I see a person looking to take advantage of the black community in the exact same way that your Barack Obama did in 2004 and your Halle Berry did in 2001. And a lot of people will wonder, well, can he make, he's really reaching with those points, but when I explain things, it'll all make sense to you. Because you have to understand the entertainment business, you have to understand how Hollywood operates, and you have to understand how it operates as it relates to the black community. Because there's always an agenda when it comes down to Hollywood and the black community. And because many African Americans do not understand the subtle politics transpiring around them when it comes down to those agendas, they wind up being taken advantage of by con artists like your Jesse Williams, your Barack Obama, and your Halle Berry. And these people are put up to the forefront by Madison Avenue advertisers and Hollywood movie studios and big business to push an agenda for black people. They get these people up to the front to be their representative, to push a narrative to the African American community. And this has been done 3 times as I see it, when it comes down to these situations. And you follow the same paradigm. And the sad part is, many African Americans can't see the paradigm that is being set up. And I can go back all the way far as 2001 with your Halle Berry when she won the Oscar for Monsters Ball. Now, a lot of people will say I am reaching with this point, but we look at the Halle Berry and what happened. Halle Berry wins the Oscar for Monsters Ball for Best Actress. African Americans, because they see this light-skinned, attractive woman being pushed to the forefront in the mainstream media, and winning this prominent award, see her as, this icon. And then all of a sudden, right after Halle Berry wins this Oscar for Monsters Ball, we get this agenda pushed in Hollywood media for this debauchery that we see today that destroyed and denigrates the image of the African American woman. Because before Halle Berry won the Oscar for Monsters Ball, the image of the African American woman was balanced. Now, afterwards, we have a promotion of a negative image of African American women. That's the only image we pretty much see over the last couple of years. We've seen them after the Monsters Ball. We've seen, your Tyler Perry movies, your Precious, all of them promoting the black woman as a victim. And in 2004, we also see, your Barack Obama, who was given the chance to give the inaugural speech at the Democratic National Convention. Again, another light-skinned, biracial individual, given a springboard to launch a platform. And after he was given that springboard, after getting this reward from these white liberals, the same way Halle Berry got an award, launched onto a platform which was then endorsed by your Oprah Winfrey for President of the United States. And then after your Barack Obama wins the presidency of the United States, we get nothing in terms of policy promoted for black people. Your Barack Obama, pretty much has done nothing for your black people in the 8 years he's been in office. He's supposed to be your first black president, but your first black president really has done nothing for you. But the African American Negro, he cannot connect the dots regarding your Barack Obama. And in both cases, black people thought they had won a major accomplishment, not knowing that there was an agenda behind both accomplishments. Yes, you got the win in the beginning, but long term, you took a loss. I mean, when Halle Berry won the Oscar in 2001 for Monsters Ball, we then saw the beginnings of the end of positive images of African Americans in media. We then saw a shift towards these debaucherous images of African Americans. Barack Obama then gets the keynote speech, the award. This junior senator gets this award, and he launches that as a springboard to a platform for presidency, endorsed by your Oprah Winfrey. And then after he wins that presidency, another agenda is pushed towards marginalizing African Americans by your own African American president. And when I look at your Jesse Williams, I see another setup coming, because here comes another mixed race African American, from a white mother. He's being pushed, given an award, a springboard to a platform, and he's saying all the right things that black people want to hear. And because he is, again, the right skin tone, the right complexion, and is visually appealing to many of these African American Negroes, they sit there and they believe that this guy is the real deal, just like they believe Halle Berry was going to open all those doors for black women in Hollywood, and they believe Barack Obama was going to open a bunch of doors for black people. Instead, ironically, more doors got closed for black people when these guys came to the forefront. And you have your Jesse Williams, out of nowhere, coming up, winning this BET Humanitarian Award, being placed on a springboard, ready to be launched to a platform. Unfortunately, African American Negroes still cannot connect the dots regarding your Jesse Williams. They listen to his rhetoric, they listen to his talking points, but they don't really break those talking points apart to see that they are pretty much part of that same liberal agenda that has been destroying the Afro-American Negro for the last 16 years. When I listen and dissect that speech, it pretty much, it's pretty much the same old things your same pro-blacks have been saying. But there's one part that pretty much defied logic for me out of all of it, where he talked about, we are going to change things. And I sit there and I say to myself, if this guy was a revolutionary, he would understand one point. The revolution is never televised. And it's just ridiculous for a guy to get on a stage of a BET, which is owned by Viacom, a white company, and then tell them what you are going to do. That pretty much defies logic. Why am I going to tell the enemy what I'm going to do? Because if the enemy, as the pro-black calls it, knows what you're going to do, then he's on the same page as you are. Again, they go back to your original Black Panthers who said the revolution would not be televised, and here we have Jesse Williams televising the revolution. Moreover, this is the same man who pretty much has been working for people like your Chandra Rhimes and your Lee Daniels in roles like in Grey's Anatomy and The Butler. How is this guy going to lead for change when he is working for the establishment? The African American Negro pretty much can't connect those two dots and see that he is being played and that there is a plan to push an agenda with this guy, and that they use the same tactics using the same types of black people, these black, light-skinned black people who are biracial, who come from white mothers and black fathers. They give them an award, use that to launch a springboard to a platform, and then use that to push an agenda towards the African American culture and the narrative of African Americans. They just can't connect those dots. And when you look at this guy's background and his profile, you can pretty much see that this guy is just, again, another Halle Berry, another Barack Obama, and he's being used to push a narrative for African Americans. And most African Americans will come at me, and say, I am an Uncle Tom, I am a sellout, I hate black people. And this is not the case at all. I love black people enough to tell them the truth so that they won't be taken advantage of, so they won't be exploited, and so they won't be made a fool of. Unfortunately, most people don't want to hear any truth from me because they want to be told what they want to hear, because I look at the pattern, I look at the paradigm, and this is what's happening. This is another light-skinned pretty boy being placed in front of black people who pretty much are looking at the color of his skin and not the content of his character and the content of his actions, and listening to a speech that sounded too good to be true and wanting it to be true because they want the magic that Jesse Williams represents and the magic they think he is going to give them. When in actuality, you're going to get the same magic that Barack Obama gave you in 2008 and 2012, and you're going to get the same doors slammed in your face that were slammed when Halle Berry won the Oscar in 2001. You don't listen to the speeches and read between the lines, and you wind up believing these same old okey dokes over and over again. And this is what I'm trying to get at. And a lot of black people, sadly, from the responses I've seen, their eyes really aren't open to what's going on. They're just wanting to be told what they want to hear and not listening to what they need to know. They think that a guy winning an award and saying the right things means that he's going to go out and help them. And I ask the question again, how is he going to help you when he is working for people like Lee Daniels and Shonda Rhimes, who are promoting negative images of African Americans in media, like those Lee Daniels movies and the television show Scandal? This same man who sat there and talked about Black Hollywood didn't say a single word about his own bosses, who have pretty much degraded the image of black people for the last 16 years. Nor did he talk, when he talked about, things like your Tamir Rice, he didn't talk about, the violence in Chicago. Chicago today, in 2016, is just like New York in 1989. It is a literal war zone. Yet this guy glosses over that, talks about Tamir Rice, but doesn't talk about Chicago, which is a war zone that black people have turned it into, and your Democrat, Rahm Emanuel, who got a second term in election, has pretty much done nothing about. He has pretty much made Chicago into a black-on-black killing field, just the same way your David Dinkins back in 1989 made New York into a killing field with over 2,000 homicides. And this guy who says he's a black activist and says he cares so much about black people, doesn't address Chicago, he doesn't address Atlanta. He sits there and talks about Tamir Rice and Eric Garner, and that really annoyed me when he talked about Eric Garner because, he sits there and talks about Eric Garner, but he doesn't talk about how our black president, pretty much took no action when it came down to your Trayvon Martin, your Michael Brown, Darren Wilson when he killed Michael Brown, and pretty much your first black attorney general refused to do anything about those cases, but he gives this all a pass. And he talks about Eric Garner, and I see how Loretta Lynch is sitting there getting ready to give that a pass as well, because we saw how quick Loretta Lynch was ready to make that speech talking about what she was going to do when that Pulse nightclub went off. When that incident at Pulse nightclub, she was ready there to make a speech and take action. But she's not available for Eric Garner. And this officer who choked out Eric Garner and his black female supervisor have been on the job for 2 years with no sort of disciplinary action, no sort of termination, and no sort of action regarding civil rights charges from your black female attorney general. No action whatsoever. And your Jesse Williams pretty much, in his big speech, never said a single word about any of that, and that really annoyed me. You're going to sit there and mention Eric Garner, but you're not going to mention how your black Democratic president did is doing nothing, has done nothing, but and he just give that a complete pass. And I sit there and I try to explain this to people, but they didn't want to listen. They were just, they want to come at you with ad hominem attacks, shaming tactics, and they want to say things like, oh, you are jealous of Jesse Williams. Well, let me explain something to you. As a guy who worked in different jobs like nonprofits, I dealt with quite a few Jesse Williams in my career. These guys come from middle class backgrounds and they come down to the inner city for some street cred. They come down to the inner city to get some work experience, and they use and exploit the black community and use it again as a springboard to take themselves to the next level, meanwhile leaving people behind who desperately need help. As a guy who grew up in the South Bronx, grew up in poverty, grew up on welfare, grew up with food stamps, grew up with Section 8, and worked his way to get his diploma and get his college degree, and then worked at a nonprofit. It really, again, irked me to see these kind of guys. They would get on the job. They would sit there with their big talk and their big words, and they'd be, talking down to people and thinking that they were the greatest thing since sliced bread. And they come down to poor people in the neighborhood, and they act like that, like they're doing them a service by just being there, and they're not thinking about meeting their needs or trying to help them. Um, this is just a stepping stone for them to get to the next level. And when I look at this Jesse Williams and where he comes from, that's what I see. Another one of these light-skinned pretty boys, who dresses up, looks all nice, tells people what they want to hear, but he's not really concerned with what's really going on in the community. He's just there to, get his street cred, get his points, and then move on to the next level. And that's exploitation as I see it. If you really are concerned with your community, you're not going to just sit there and, say all the right things. You're going to understand that there's more to this than just saying all the right things that tell people want to hear. Yeah, that makes people feel good for a minute, but at the end of the day, it leads to the same old dysfunction continuing to go on when you have a guy like that in a prominent position, because that's what I see that's what I used to see when I used to work at the Strive program. And those guys, after they got their credit, these light-skinned pretty boys who came from these top schools, they what they did was, after they got their street cred and they got their work credit, what they did was they used that as a springboard to go into other jobs, and they pretty much left the black community behind. And that's what I see being done right here. This guy's so-called humanitarian action, pretty much contradicts his Hollywood background. When I look at the credits on his resume, as an actor versus his so-called community work, they pretty much are diametrically opposed. Again, you can't say that you are for the black community and then go to work for people like your Chandra Rhimes and Lee Daniels, who degrade the black community. It's total hypocrisy when you break that down. You can't say you're for one and then for the other. And then you cannot also get involved with groups like your Black Lives Matter, who are also hypocritical, and because they only come out, when there is a white cop who kills a black person, or a non-black person who kills a black person, and they talk about Black Lives Matter in that state, but they don't talk about Black Lives Mattering in places like Chicago, Atlanta, and even here in New York, where we have these black-on-black crimes. But you want to say that Black Lives Matter, but again, they only matter when you mention them in the context of white cops or non-black people. When they're mentioned in the context of your Chicagos or your New Yorks or your Atlantas, where the homicide rate among African Americans is through the roof, nobody wants to talk about that. I mean, this is the guy who will talk about Tamir Rice, but he won't talk about Todd West, the mass murderer who shot 8 people. And no one, in your pro-black community has said a single word about that guy. And he killed 8 people, and no one says a single word about him. I mean, if you say you are concerned about black people, you have to really be concerned with them from a broader perspective, not a narrow one that fits a narrative. And when I see your Jesse Williams, again, I see a guy who is just trying to fit into a narrative and is just using this BET Humanitarian Award as a springboard towards pushing an agenda that furthers a white liberal narrative that continues to denigrate and degrade the image of black people, the culture of black people, and the people as a race overall. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe.